By the late 1960s, the highway coach business in America had turned into a different kind of ballgame. Greyhound, the giant that once lived and died with GM, was buying MC-7s and MC-8s by the hundreds. Trailways, their rival, was putting its money into those glamorous Eagle Model 01s and 05s. The GM name was still respected, but at Truck & Coach in Pontiac you could feel it slipping away. The old PD-4906 was a fine machine in its day, but by then its power and comfort felt a step behind the new crowd. Even the first-generation Buffalo coaches, the PD-4107 and PD-4903, were starting to show their limits. Independent operators wanted a full 40-foot coach with more muscle, more seats, and a better ride if they were going to keep up on the interstate. GM didn't have the luxury of standing still. They needed a new layout, easier shifting, more capacity, something built for charter work and long federal highway runs. And that set the stage for what came next, the full evolution of the Buffalo line. GM had introduced the first-generation Buffaloes a few years earlier, the PD-4107 and the longer PD-4903, built from 1966 through 1969. They were bold for their time, but the market was changing faster than those early models could keep up. So, GM pushed into a second generation. From 1970 to 1972 came the PD-4108 and its big brother, the PD-4905, the very coach at the center of our story. Production was short, and only 331 PD-4905s ever rolled out, which is why collectors still whisper about them today. It was a transition model, stronger and more refined than the 4903, yet not as polished as the next wave. That next wave arrived as the A-Series, the P8M4108A and P8M4905A, running from 1972 to 1978, followed by the final chapter, the H8H-649 in 1979 to 1980. When that last model left Pontiac, GM's long era of highway coaches quietly came to an end. Move a little farther down that timeline, and you start to see why the Buffalo name stuck. These coaches didn't just run differently, they looked different. The most striking cue was that stepped roof up front, a gentle hump that lifted the forward section and gave the coach its unmistakable profile. From the driver's seat forward, the cabin sat high with those wide parlor-style windows that made the whole coach feel tall and confident. Up front, the design stayed clean and purposeful, a tight face, dual headlamps, and big side windows that wrapped the passengers in light. GM shaped the body with curved aluminum panels, aircraft-type skin that gave the coach a premium, sculpted look few competitors could match. Around back, the wide engine hatch and the late 60s GM tail lamp layout completed the stance. And once you'd seen one on the highway, that silhouette became unforgettable. From a distance, you didn't need a badge or a logo. One glance at that roofline and you knew a Buffalo was coming. That distinctive shape wasn't just for looks. Underneath, the Buffalo rode on a true integral body. No traditional ladder frame running the length of the coach. GM built the structure from curved, load-bearing panels that tied the whole shell together. It made the coach lighter than a comparable steel frame design, yet strong enough to handle hundreds of thousands of miles without working itself loose. That construction also gave the Buffalo a natural resistance to twisting forces, something every long-distance coach fights day after day. On rough pavement or high-crown highways, the body didn't shudder or flex the way older designs sometimes did, and passengers up front felt far less vibration than they expected from a big diesel machine. Supporting all of this was a full air ride suspension, with airbags at all four corners. At highway speeds, that setup settled the coach into a smooth, confident stride, one of the traits operators praised most. Of course, After 4 or 5 decades, nothing stays perfect. Restorers today often find rust starting around subframes and airbag mounts, the small but stubborn weak points of an aging monocoque design. And beneath that smooth-riding shell lived the part of the Buffalo that every old driver remembers, the unmistakable heartbeat of a Detroit diesel 8V71. It was a 2-stroke V8, mounted sideways across the tail of the coach, barking through its blower with that sharp Detroit cadence you could hear half a block away. GM paired it with their signature V-drive layout, where the engine and transmission sat horizontally and fed power into a gear set that kicked everything 45 degrees into the rear axle. It kept the center of gravity low and made the coach surprisingly maneuverable for its size. But it also meant the engine bay ran hot and tight. Most PD-4905s left Pontiac with a Spicer 4-speed, a synchronized box that shifted far easier than the crash boxes of the early 60s. Later on, and especially in the A-Series, many coaches carried an Allison 3-speed automatic, a blessing for charter operators and anyone running heavy city traffic. One of GM's smartest ideas was the engine cradle. Instead of wrestling with components inside a cramped compartment, mechanics could roll the entire engine transmission assembly straight out the back for an overhaul. Supporting systems followed GM's familiar pattern: a side-mounted radiator drawing air through a big mechanical fan, and a right-side exhaust that gave the Buffalo its deep, echoing bark on long grades. It was all classic GM truck and coach engineering, compact, clever, and built to run hard. Put all that engineering together and you get a coach built to full American highway proportions. The PD-4905 stretched a full 40 feet from bumper to bumper, measured 96 inches across, and typically seated around 53 passengers in parlor coach comfort. Under the floor sat 3 large luggage bays with outward swinging doors, plenty of room for college teams, tour groups, or cross-country baggage. Some operators ordered a tag axle to satisfy strict axle weight rules in certain states. GM placed that auxiliary axle just ahead of the drive axle, which worked well on the open road but did steal a slice of the rearmost luggage bay. And with its longer wheelbase, the famous extra 5 feet, the Buffalo could be a handful in cramped depots. More than one driver learned the hard way how easily those big bay doors could kiss a concrete post. Step inside, and the Buffalo carried its own kind of quiet charm. Up front, the floor stepped upward for the first 3 rows, giving those seats a slightly elevated theater-style view, one of the small touches that made these parlor coaches feel a little more special. The seats themselves were classic 1970s GM, thick cushions, tall backs, and just enough recline to stay comfortable on a long haul. A restroom sat in the rear, exactly where passengers of that era expected it, tucked behind the last row. Along the sides, wide windows rose well above car height, filling the cabin with light and giving riders a sweeping view of the road and the countryside rolling by. Overhead, open racks held coats and small bags, and the big ducted HVAC system ran the length of the ceiling with that unmistakable hum of a 70s highway coach. Out on the interstate, the ride settled in beautifully. At 60 or 70 miles an hour, the Buffalo floated more than it bounced, and while you could hear the 8V71 working at the back, the forward cabin stayed surprisingly calm. It was comfort measured in the way only old coaches delivered it. For the folks behind the wheel, the PD-4905 had a personality all its own. With its long wheelbase, the coach settled beautifully once you were out on the open road, steady, planted, and almost lazy in the way it tracked a straight line. But that same length could make tight depots a real workout. More than one driver learned to inch into a station with the mirrors wide, shoulders tense, and every sense tuned to keep those bay doors away from concrete corners. The low center of gravity helped the Buffalo glide through highway curves with a smoothness that surprised newcomers. Shifting the Spicer synchronized 4-speed felt like a gift compared to the earlier 4903. The gears came together cleaner, quicker, and with far less drama, though you still needed a good double-clutch rhythm to keep everything happy. From the high-set driver's perch, framed by those wide parlor windows, visibility was outstanding. You saw the road the way only a highway coach driver can, wide, open, and inviting. Out on the interstate, the Buffalo came alive. The 8V71 would settle into its deep, determined bark, tough, reliable, and willing to push mile after mile if you treated it right. But the engine bay ran hot, and in slow stations or summer heat, you felt it. And in small terminals, the Buffalo demanded respect. Its length and rear overhang meant you planned every turn like a chess move. But once you learned its quirks, it was a coach you could grow fond of, strong, honest, and steady under your hands. On the road, the PD-4905 found its home with the operators who still believed in GM. Many coaches went to companies within the Trailways system, where the Buffalo's looks and highway manners earned real respect. Independent charter outfits liked it too, solid, dependable, and easier to maintain than the flashier imports. College athletic departments ran them across state lines on fall weekends, and even Greyhound kept a small handful in service, despite shifting most of its buying power to MCI. And that was the real battleground of the day. The MCI MC-7 was the undisputed highway champion, fast, strong, and tailor-made for Greyhound's long-haul routes. The Eagle Model 05, on the other hand, became Trailways' luxury favorite with its European flair. The Buffalo had to carve out space between them, relying on durability and that uniquely American silhouette. In the culture of the 1970s, the 4905 showed up everywhere: films, news clips, travel brochures. For many Americans now in their 60s or 70s, it remains the picture that pops into their mind when someone says, "old bus." Part of the charm was its clean, authoritative look. Part was the throaty song of the 8V71 pushing through the gears. And out on the interstate, few coaches felt as calm or as confident. As the years rolled on and the big fleets moved to newer equipment, the PD-4905 found a second life that suited it surprisingly well. Many of them were converted into motorhomes, especially the A-Series, because that aluminum monocoque shell was strong, dry, and far more durable than most steel-bodied coaches of the era. A few Buffaloes even made it onto the road as entertainer coaches, hauling bands and crews from show to show with that familiar Detroit growl following them down the highway. Collectors eventually took notice. A handful of 4905s have been restored in full Greyhound or Trailways colors, polished to museum quality. But true survivors, coaches with original panels, solid subframes, and intact interiors, have grown incredibly rare. Their value now lies not just in metal, but in memory. And that's the legacy. The Buffalo line was the last generation of GM highway coaches, closing a chapter that stretched from the silver sides of the 1940s to the dawn of the 1980s. Today, the PD-4905 stands as one of the most recognizable long-distance machines America ever put on the road. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, hit that like button, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe for more classic machines.